Namo Vishnu Vidaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namani Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharini Vishesha Srinivadi Pasutadistani. So, as I understand it, that we are talking about Prakriti and in relationship to an overall understanding of, we talked about Ishvar, the Supreme Controller. We talked about us, Jiva. And then there's another factor that we are very familiar with, which is the world around us, that which is perceptible to us through our senses. So categorically, that's referred to as Prakriti. Oftentimes we just call it nature. But when we call it Prakriti, it's a more scientific understanding because it suggests our relationship to it relative to, as we discussed, Ishva. So, first of all, Krishna just gives a basic composite analysis of what it is when he says it's made out of. And then he lists the elements: earth, water, fire, air, ether. And then those are gross elements. And then mind, intelligence, and ego. So, okay, that's the components of it. That's what it's made of. We can kind of see that, although a lot of that we can't see, right? They say like the human body is whatever it is, 90% water. Well, you can't see that. If they said the ocean is 90% water, okay, I can see that. Or they say that you have a fire in your stomach. Well, don't feel that a little bit. So even these elements and how they combine, it's very mysterious and mystical. But uh, then, so Krishna calls it his inferior energy. So then what does that mean? Like it's not as good? No, it's it's a matter of understanding that the superiority of consciousness as compared to matter, meaning that consciousness can manipulate matter. So we can understand these things intuitively. We don't need Bhagavad-Gita for that. But Krishna, when he calls it his inferior energy, he goes on to explain that the reason that that inferior energy even exists in the first place, right? If you're God, why do you need an inferior energy? You're enjoying your superior energy. You don't even need an inferior energy. So it is to explain that the reason for that existing in the first place, the inferior nature. And it has something to do with, um, you could say, incarceration or subjugation of the jiva. Uh, it's relative to that. Prakriti exists for that reason, to facilitate a certain illusion. Otherwise, there's no need for Prakriti, but it does exist. So Krishna calls it his inferior energy. So one thing I found very interesting about, well, let's first of all talk a little bit more about the Prakriti. We talked about what it's made out of, but I think more interesting is that Krishna says that there's nothing in all of existence which is separate from the gunas. So gunas are also a component factor of Prakriti. And gunas are described in different parts of the Bhagavad Gita, particularly the 14th chapter and the 17th chapter. We find description of how things are in different gunas, or Prabhupada translates it as modes, modes of nature. And so it's only three. It's not hard to remember. Mode of goodness, called sattva guna. Mode of passion, called rajaguna. Mode of ignorance, called tama guna, tamas. And so why does Krishna, well, it's divided in these three gunas, right? Then he explains how, or he gives some idea how you can recognize this guna versus that guna. You can begin to perceive a sattva guna as opposed to rajaguna, or what to speak of tamaguna. And he says these things are perceivable in things like food. It has different gunas. It's not just food. It's a guna in the sense that it affects our consciousness. It affects my consciousness. So this is food. This food is sattva guna. This food is rajaguna. This food is tamaguna. Meaning, if I eat all this tamaguna food, I become a little bit tamagunish. And the disadvantage of that, of course, is that from a tamagun perspective, you don't see much. Even from a rajaguna perspective, if I'm associating with different things in rajaguna, I don't see much, or my vision is obscured. Krishna talks about seeing, right? When he talks about understanding truth, he talks about seeing truth, which I think is very interesting. So backing up a little bit, Krishna uses the word tattva. Well, this is getting away from the modes back to the category prakriti. So in the fourth chapter, he says that you can understand the truth by approaching a tattvadarshi. Specifically, he says you can understand a tattva by approaching a tattvadarshi, one who sees what is truth. So the tattvas then are, prakriti is the tattva. It is a category of a true thing. Ishvar is a tattva, Vishnu tattva, prakriti tattva, and then we have, of course, jiva tattva. And it's a simple concept, but when you think about it, as long as you can keep these three tattvas in their proper category, you have the proper perspective on reality. And if you confuse these three tattvas, then your perception of reality is very much skewed. So if, as an example, if I confuse Vishnu tattva with Jiva tattva, meaning that I think Jiva tattva is Vishnu tattva, I am God. Well, that's just wrong. It's not true. So you've confused your tattvas. If I can confuse Jiva tattva, myself, with Prakriti tattva, again, I'm just wrong. Meaning that that confusion is, I believe that I am what I see in the mirror. That's what I am. That's a categorical mistake. I'm taking one tattva to be a different tattva. I'm taking Jiva tattva to be Prakriti tattva. Right? That's not me. That there's an illusion that it's me, but it's not me. Or sometimes a person can take Vishnu tattva and confuse him with Prakriti tattva, meaning that Krishna took birth just like me. He's just another guy. He may be a little bit better looking. He can play a better flute, but he's just one of the guys. So that's also confusing Vishnu tattva and Prakriti tattva. So that's why we make these categories so we can understand that they are very much distinct and they have a different place in the reality of the cosmos. Um, so those are the tattvas. Now, getting back to these modes of nature, they are a part of the Prakriti tattva. And as Krishna explains, I made a couple notes, if you don't mind me looking, that, well, in the Bhagavad Gita, he talks about many things in a particular guna or particular mode. I already mentioned food. He also talks about charity. Giving charity can be in the mode of goodness, can be in the mode of passion, can be in the mode of ignorance. So you're thinking giving charity, that's a good thing. You're giving charity in the mode of ignorance, the result is not good. So, like, for example, charity in the mode of ignorance would be I lend 20 bucks to my friend so he can buy a bottle of whiskey. Okay, that's very charitable. I'm giving him 20 bucks. That charity is in the mode of ignorance. There's no tangible uh, good thing that comes of it. He talks about work. Work can be in goodness, passion, or ignorance. Um, of course, keeping in mind that uh, the example given is primary colors to describe the gunas: red, yellow, blue. So not everything that we see is red, yellow, or blue. In fact, quite the opposite. When we look around the world, practically nothing naturally is just red, yellow, or blue. Everything is a combination, a complex combination of these colors. Um, so similarly, the modes of nature, it's not so categorically simple to say, oh, this is the mode of goodness, this is the mode of ignorance, this is the mode of passion, because there's so many, there, like there's so many colors, there's so many um, small differences between this mode and that mode. Um, so, but still, Krishna does give us, he paints with broad strokes and he says, this is goodness, this is passion, this is ignorance. And the reason he describes the material nature in these different categories is to assist the jiva in making proper decision. Because as he says, from the mode of goodness, knowledge develops. So there's a perfect example of taking Prakriti and getting some tangible benefit from it. Now, uh, again, Prakriti, understanding that Krishna says his inferior energy. Well, there's nothing inferior about anything in relationship to Krishna, right? We don't say, oh, Krishna's finger is just his finger. It's not as nice as his smile. See, we don't make those kind of distinctions. That God means absolute. That even the description is there in the Nectar of Devotion. Even the tip of his fingernail, Rupa Goswami describes in poetic terms. It's like a beautiful moon, crescent moon shining. So it is with every single aspect of Lord Krishna. One eyelash. Um, um, in fact, not only Krishna, but there's a description of Mother Yashoda. Mother Yashoda saw Krishna was out, but she saw his stick in a corner of the house. So what is the result? She fell into a trance of ecstasy by seeing, because that stick made her think of Krishna. And so she falls into a trance of ecstasy. So when Krishna talks about his inferior energy or his separated material energy, it's not really separated from Krishna because nothing can exist separate from Krishna, right? It's impossible. So in that way, when we see Prakriti, if we're seeing with the right eyes, we see God, right? Everywhere. I mean, that's how a pure devotee sees that, because it reminds him, just like the stick reminded Mother Yashoda, the beauty of And oftentimes Prabhupada would say things like that, oh, the ocean is the sign, the sound of the ocean waves is the sign of the gopis. Um, I just read Prabhupada said that the uh, singing of birds is like Krishna's whisper. So, so a pure devotee is seeing God present in God's creation, but it's not poetic, it's factual, because Krishna is not separate from it. So, in that sense, there's nothing inferior or separated about his prakriti, but it exists exclusively and only to facilitate illusion. That's why it exists. And whose illusion? My illusion. My, as in me, the conditioned soul. Me, the individual who suddenly discovers that I'm in the material world. I'm a part of the Prakriti, even though, according to Bhagavad Gita, I'm not supposed to be. I have a much higher calling than merely my social responsibilities and relative to Canada 2021. I have a much higher calling than meeting those kinds of social or family or whatever kind of responsibilities. And relative to my responsibility to Krishna, uh, these things are very insignificant. So Krishna makes some other interesting points that I think are worth considering about the material nature. That, and I think this is very fascinating, that we talked about these modes of material nature. And Krishna says that there's nothing anywhere, anything which is not a product or an expression of these modes of nature. Guna, these gunas, passion, ignorance, and goodness. And he gives us some examples so we can begin to see the world and recognize the world as belonging to these different categories so that I can separate myself from something. If something is strictly Rajaguna or Tamaguna, then I want to withdraw from that atmosphere, from that influence, because I want to take advantage of sunshine, get the vitamin D. So the sunshine is Krishna's knowledge, Krishna's grace, Krishna's blessings. So I want to make sure that I'm in a position to be receptive to those things of the Lord because they're there. If they're there, why would I not want to take advantage, expose myself to Krishna's mercy, Krishna's blessing? So the modes, so understanding these modes means I take advantage by associating with mode of goodness things. Wherever I'm perceptive enough to recognize mode of goodness thing, I can take advantage of it. So anyway, in 334, or maybe 339, I forget now, Krishna says that these modes, they act only upon us when we try to exploit them. In other words, freedom from the prakriti which binds us, the prakriti which limits us, freedom from the prakriti is possible when I give up the notion that prakriti is meant for my separate personal enjoyment. Excuse me, let me just tell my other people in this house to quit talking. Okay, and to quiet up the mob. So, yes, Krishna says that those modes act only when we try to exploit them. So, what is that verse 339? I will see if I can find it. Um, okay. Spirit consciousness is covered. Oh, if it covers, no, it must be 334. Oh, yes. Okay. So it says attraction and repulsion for sense objects. So that's something we may be familiar with, attraction or repulsion from sense objects, um, is felt by embodied beings. So everybody is attracted by some form of prakriti. Um, you can't help it. That to me, that's beautiful. I'm attracted. It's Krishna's inferior energy, but I'm attracted. So he says that's a given. Attraction and repulsion to the prakriti is felt. But, and this is where Krishna is indicating our role, says one should not fall under the control of senses and sense objects. Um, the reason being that they are stumbling blocks on the path of self-realization. So you see how Krishna is telling us that the prakriti, the jiva has the power. He's a superior energy in the sense that he has the power to manipulate prakriti for his benefit or to exploit prakriti for his degradation. So the jiva has that option, according to Krishna. And he also says that by spiritual practice, so like Arjuna, he complains to Krishna, he says, I just can't do it. I cannot control my mind. The mind is being a part of the force of material nature, a force that we're familiar with. So Arjuna says, I just can't do it. And what is Krishna's response in the Bhagavad Gita? He's sympathetic. He says, yes, that's a hard one, but it's possible by practice. That's Krishna's simple advice. All these things are difficult, okay, but it's possible. It's not impossible. So when we're talking about the lofty goals of Krishna consciousness, okay, that's impossible. No, not according to Krishna, not impossible. Otherwise, what is the point of Vyasadeva compiling the Vedas? What is the point of great saints like Srila Prabhupada coming and giving this message? Why work so hard translating and traveling and preaching if it's impossible, if it's something nobody will ever attain? Does that make sense? Does it make sense that God would not want his sons and daughters to have full freedom and love and light? But, so he says, yes, it's difficult. Prakriti can act as a very oppressive kind of thing on you, but he says it's possible. And how is it possible? He says, practice, determination and practice. If you don't practice, if you don't have determination, you won't practice. So in that case, if I don't have those things, if I'm not willing to embrace those things, then okay, then it's impossible. So anyway, that's the overall idea of our relationship to Prakriti. It's twofold. Prakriti is something I can use to elevate myself. How? By seeing it as Krishna's energy and meant for Krishna's pleasure. Like a flower, it's meant for Krishna. It's a beautiful thing, but it's not for my girlfriend, it's for Krishna. Or something that I can approach in a very selfish way, where I try and get as much as I can for me. If I view Prakriti, if I view nature in that way, then I can degrade myself, and there is practically no limit to how low I can go. Once you start on the downward spiral of hellish life, there's practically no limit. And you see that person that you see on Hastings Street that looks like a ghost and is practically dead, that's also a spirit soul. That's also a divine being of light who has made the wrong choices in relationship to Prakriti. So anyway, that's Krishna's advice, that one can elevate oneself by you gain control. There's one other verse I made a note that supports that point. It's 264. Let's see why I thought that helped. Oh, yeah. I think this is a beautiful verse from Bhagavad Gita. Krishna says, Raga dvesha vimuktais tu, vishayan indriyais charan, atma vaishya vidheyatma prasadam adigachati. It's a nice verse because it has the word prasadam in it.
Mhm.
One who can control his senses by practicing the regulated principles of freedom can obtain the complete mercy of the Lord and thus become free from all attachment, all aversion, become free from the oppressive influence of Prakriti by how controlling one's senses and practicing regulated principles. Such a simple concept. Okay, so that's about as deep as Yoginath's well goes. Sorry, on this particular topic. I don't know if you want to systematically look at the specific questions that were meant for this topic. Because I don't have a prospectus in front of me, so I don't know what parts of Prakriti we wanted to talk about.
I actually have a question for you. At the very end there, you talked about the regulative principles of freedom. That sounds completely contradictory. How could regulation equal freedom?
Well, if we just see where I am right now, uh, we can say I'm not free in any way. The material nature has me in her grip in terms of the aging process. I'm not free. I can't start becoming younger. Um, in so many ways, I'm I'm like in the grip, strong grip. So in that sense, my freedom is limited to what I imagine, kind of, right? You can always dream. So that's my freedom. So um, the one principle of Krishna consciousness that Prabhupada talks about, because Prabhupada experienced it so obviously, that when Krishna chooses to bless, he can bless and empower that devotee to do things 1,000 times greater than he might have imagined. So coming from, you're sitting on a boat with no money and you have a heart attack and you're 75 years old and I'm going to a foreign country. So my prospects aren't very great. The possibility of success is like 0.000. But then there's a Krishna factor. So Krishna can uh, bless beyond one's expectations. So the answer to that question then is that what we imagine to be freedom, um, we don't know where to turn. Where do I find freedom? Somebody like me who is so controlled, so much under Prakriti, I don't even know what freedom is. So um, this concept of freedom then is it's a descending freedom. It's God's blessings. That kind of freedom, that goes beyond what one would expect could happen, does happen due to those descendant blessings. It's a greater power. So that kind of freedom, that's the kind of freedom we're talking about. We're not talking about the freedom to I'm not going to bow down to any man because I'm free. Um, that's one level of freedom. So okay, you're exercising your free will. Your free will within a box 2-inch square. You're exercising your free will. But rather, when we talk about the regulative principles of freedom, we're talking about a freedom that is um, transcendent. So the transcendent freedom is accessed by uh, material discipline. You could say material, but by discipline. So yes, they might sound contradictory, but it's not contradictory. One because you can't practice uh, regulative principles unless you've understood something. You don't practice it because for no reason. It's because I understand. So you're already executing your freedom. You're already executing your free will to choose to follow these principles. So it's actually an act, it's an expression of freedom to choose to want to serve God is the beginning of freedom. And from that initial decision, um, it's quite possible that the ultimate freedom of mukti becomes available. Okay. Well, thank you, folks. You've been a very quiet audience. Can't hear you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Prabhu,
Any questions?
Yes.
I sometimes feel that no matter how consciously you eat, you think, you behave, and you act, um, you are still switching between three modes of nature. Um, you cannot say that I'm always in a state of mode of goodness. You may believe to be in that state of goodness, and that's a very big claim one can claim that I'm doing these conscious choices and I'm mindful and I'm careful, but still at some point during the day, month, week, your little act is, it's very easy to slip into that mode of passion or ignorance. But I kind of feel if you're consciously practicing, then it's much easier to pull yourself out of mode of passion because
Yes.
you are training yourself. But it's not like you're always going to be in that mode, that best possible mode of goodness, because slips are happening in our life, right?
Yes.
We're always slipping.
Well, Krishna says, for example, he tells Arjuna, from wherever and whatever the mind wanders, due to its flickering nature, you withdraw it and bring it back under the control of the self. So Krishna, right off the bat, is acknowledging, yes, there is some variance here. But at the same time, if you see a picture of your child or somebody you know when they were young, and you see them now, you couldn't see the transformation. You don't know how they got from A to B. I mean, you might have snapshots, but all of a sudden, this person is this person. How did that all happen? So the process of transformation is not so perceptible, is what I'm saying. So that if I am regularly trying to be aware of goodness, for example, and in this case, for a devotee, goodness means what pleases Krishna. That's that's our definition, our standard for goodness, what pleases Krishna. But if I'm at least consciously trying, or within my whatever little power I do have, to please Krishna, to uh, live in goodness, then I'm also growing. That growth is not perceptible immediately, but it's taking place because nothing is static. Life is a dynamic affair, so things are happening. My ability to perceive it may not be there, but uh, again, Krishna is not just dangling a carrot in front of us to fool us. It's because this is what we are. You are in goodness already. That's what you are. So He's helping us just to become what we are. But yes, it can be frustrating in the sense that I would like to be more advanced than I am. I would like to be really serious about Krishna consciousness. But nonetheless, Krishna is not an evil taskmaster, so that our humble attempts are not unnoticed and not without ultimate fruit, even though I'm not seeing it and I feel like I'm always slipping back into this mode. Every time I stub my toe, I say a bad word or whatever.
So being aware is making progress.
Of course.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Well, is that
Jade,
it?
you have a question? No, Jade has a question.
I do have a question. I wanted to start doing prasad, but like my question is about garlic and onions, because I know that maybe that's in the mode of passion, and then
Right.
you cannot give prasad to Krishna if it has onions and garlic. But what if in the beginning, before I'm able to give that up, I still want to offer and it has that in it? Is it okay that I give it, or is that like really bad?
Well, you can never say trying to offer something to Krishna is bad. You just use hing. You know hing?
No.
You don't know hing? It's a
No.
perfect solution. It's a type of spice it's a tree resin, but it's not garlic onion, but it has a similar effect on food. So you just fry a little hing with your ginger and put that in. But in the meantime, Krishna knows our heart. That's all. So if I'm trying to cheat Krishna, then that doesn't work. But if I'm genuine and I'm sincere, well, Krishna knows that.
Because the other day I tried to offer salad, but then after I put my dressing on and it had garlic in it, and then I felt like, oh, maybe that's trying to skirt the rules and that's not okay. I feel like a little bit unsure of what's the rules.
Yeah. Well, the main rule is try to become Krishna conscious. The little rules are little rules. Look for the big rules. And the little rules are, not much consequence. But there's some really good salad dressings without onion and garlic, but you have to make them yourself.
That's right. I want to build the practice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Actually, Yoginath Prabhu is very expert at making
Salad dressing?
salad dressings. Yes. Very good. You don't even think of onion and garlic. You don't even miss one little bit. Raj, you have a question?
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna to all. Thank you so much. Nice class. Yoginath
thought
Prabhu,
that-
Hare Krishna.
I thought that picture of Krishna was Raj. That was
Krishna is always here. He is here.
Oh.
That's why Zoom is working.
oh,
Otherwise, Zoom won't work. I
That's
think
right.
COVID is a boon for me, because I kind of get into indirect association, but it is an association. So I take COVID as a boon for me.
Yeah.
Prabhu, my question was, many times we think whatever is happening with us in our life is due to our karmas, which is very important part of Krishna consciousness, right? What we did in past life, our karma is practically giving us the results here. So now how much karma is included in this our getting in these three gunas? Let's say as a aspiring devotee, as a, you want to be always in mode of goodness. So, but there are circumstances where you can be a little angry because of somebody else provoking you or whatever. There can be circumstances. So how we relate this circumstance to me getting in this mode of ignorance or being angry, or should I connect it to, okay, this should be a karma of my past life? Could you please explain that?
Well, Krishna at some point, I mean, karma is meant for a conditioned soul. A person who's surrendering to Krishna, this is my understanding, this is what Prabhupada said, and which Krishna says at the end of the Bhagavad Gita, where he says, Sarvadhamma Pritita Mam Ekam Shadan Vaja Aham Tvam Sarva Papi. So I'm taking your pop. That's my problem now. So in that sense, karma and pop or sinful reaction is synonymous. That my karma and my sin, Krishna is saying I take away. So Krishna says I take away your sin, your pop, but I'm still here and things are still happening to me. So is that my karma, or so the way Prabhupada explains it is like when you unplug a fan, the fan still goes around, but the power which made that fan go in the first place has been disconnected. So that fan just spins out and stops. But at the beginning, when you pull the plug, it's still going. So that's to give us some perspective of on what is karma, because karma is meant to punish, not punish, but it's just reaction. Did this, here's your reaction, take it. But Krishna's intention is to teach. So if Krishna is taking over, then it's not necessarily, obviously some things are a result of my past karma. My body, its disposition, its abilities, it's karma. I'm not going to become a beautiful singer because I've already got the body of a lousy singer. So in that sense, I am defined by my karma. But in the other sense, when Krishna is trying to teach through life, through Prakriti, that's not karma, that's Krishna teaching. So if I'm seeing that way, then I'm always thinking, how can I learn from this event? And, if I don't learn it completely, then Krishna teaches me the same lesson again. And, it's until you pass, then you go on to the next grade. So if I see the events in my life as not karma, but as Krishna trying to teach, then I'll be trying to learn. I won't just be reacting. I'll be seeing it as, I can learn from this because Krishna wants me to grow. And then in that sense, nobody has the power to make me unhappy. They don't have that power, right? So, I have to see that karma is really not so significant in the life of a devotee. It's more about growing and learning and seeing Krishna's lessons, because that's what Krishna says. So it must be the case.
And also one thing about the Mataji who asked about onion and garlic. Maybe you wanna tell us everyone how that onion and garlic came. When the demon head was being cut off and where it fell, the onion and garlic grow. So that is one of the reason in Gaudiya Vaishnava they don't use onion and garlic. That's a very nice story.
Yes.
When he was in the line with all the demigods, and then demigods kind of recognized him. He was in the middle of sun and moon, I think, yeah. And then Vishnu with his chakra cut his head off. So where the head went, the onion and garlic came. This is another reason why we don't offer onion and garlic to Krishna, because it came out of a demon.
Yeah. That they used to, it used to be an airlines called TWA, called Trans World Airlines. It was a major airline at one time, in the 60s. And they had restrictions that their pilots were not allowed to eat garlic within 1 or 2 hours before flying.
I read that, Prabhu. Yes.
Yeah. So it was scientifically acknowledged that this has a negative impact on your reflexes and your reactions.
Yes,
It's
Prabhu,
not
you're right.
so. But I was just recalling, there's a devotee used to be in Vancouver named Vedavyas. So Vedavyas, he grows tomatoes now, and he saves all the seeds. So he sent me his tomato seeds. So I was, oh, I remember Vedavyas. We did a fast one time, and part of this fast was we had to drink onion soup. So I'm not even sure why they were, what it was, but we were very young brahmacharis. We thought, okay, we're purifying ourselves as medicine. So there is this notion that they are medicinal, right? Onion is medicinal, garlic is medicinal, but there's other medicines that are better than that, a higher mode. Anyway,
Also,
those are, you know, if onion and garlic is the only problem you're dealing with in your Krishna consciousness, you're doing good.
right. Also, a devotee avoids those foods because they tend to create passion and ignorance in the body.
Right.
So as much as possible, we want to avoid them. But you know, as Yoginath Prabhu says, if this is your only problem, then we don't want to focus on that. So try to avoid, and sometimes it may be inevitable. You may be visiting someone's house and they may have made this big endeavor to cook vegetarian for you, and then they put onion in the salad. Hare Krishna. So you just grateful, maybe put the onion on the side, and that's it. You know, we don't focus on the little things. We focus on the big things, on the very important things.
Actually, it's 2 years that we are not eating any onion and garlic. It's like disappeared from our home. And food is way better now. The quality of food, the taste of food is way better than onion and garlic. I can't imagine that without onion and garlic, you can make such a good food. It is actually, it cleanses you from inside. You can feel that food right into your mind when you eat it. You know, it's good food.
It's that way with all of our attachments, big and small, that as we grow, which seemed like a very difficult attachment, is like nothing. And you don't even think about it anymore. You know, like for somebody who gives up eating meat, 5 years later, how did I eat meat in the first place? So any attachment is like that in the material world. As we get closer to Krishna, then all of these things are like, who wants anything but Krishna? Seriously. So this, you don't even have to worry about it. You worry about getting closer to Krishna, and whatever the attachment is, it just becomes gone, just disappears.
Are there any more questions? No more questions. Okay, well, I hate to leave everybody. It's very wonderful to have your association on. You have a question, Rod?
You were saying thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for being here again tonight. Thank you for your association. Thank you, Yoginath Prabhu, for a very wonderful class. I really appreciated it. Haribo.
Haribo.
Thank you. Haribo.
Haribo.
Hare Krishna.
Haribo. See you next
Hare Krishna
week.
to all. Haribo.
Haribo.
Today is appearance day of Purushottam Das Thakur, if I'm not wrong.
Oh, I always forget. You're always on top of that, Raj. I forgot to look.
Yeah, I think
Very
so.
good. I'm glad you reminded me.
So Purushottam Das Thakur ki jai. It's a great Vaishnava.
Haribo.
Haribo.
Oh, yes, please. Okay, Hare Krishna, Haribo.
Krishna.